I'm Dr. Charles Mendoza, a biblical scholar specializing in eschatological studies for over 25 years. For the past decade, I've specifically researched prophetic patterns in the Book of Revelation at Denver Seminary. But what I'm going to share today didn't emerge from my academic studies. It emerged from something I witnessed 7 years ago when I accompanied my nephew Michael during the final days of his life. Michael was only 6 years old when doctors at Children's Hospital Colorado diagnosed him with advanced leukemia in March 2018. He was a curious kid with big dark eyes, always asking questions about everything. His parents, my sister Carmen and her husband Robert, weren't believers. They lived in a small apartment in downtown Denver, filled with engineering textbooks and scientific magazines. Even in the hospital bed with IV tubes in his small, thin arms, Michael kept asking questions. He liked to observe everything, the machines that beeped constantly, the nurses coming and going, the snow falling outside his 5th-floor window overlooking the Rocky Mountains. "Uncle Charles, what happens when the last trumpet sounds?" he asked me one April afternoon in 2018 while watching snowflakes drift past the frosted window. His eyes shone with an intensity that didn't match his age. He had been reading a children's Bible I'd given him months earlier when he was still healthy. What was extraordinary wasn't his question. Children ask about death when they sense it approaching. What was extraordinary was what he described afterward. For 3 consecutive days between April 15th and 17th, 2018, Michael began relating with incredible detail a sequence of events that corresponded exactly with the 7 trumpets of Revelation chapters 8 and 9. He hadn't studied the Bible deeply. The only religious book he knew was that children's Bible with simple illustrations and summarized texts. But Michael described elements that weren't in that children's book, elements that required years of theological study to fully understand. "The first trumpet burns up 1/3 of the trees," Michael told me that first afternoon, drawing with his small finger on the white hospital sheet. "But Uncle, it's not normal fire. It's fire that comes from above, like hail that burns when it hits the ground." His exact words were documented by nurse Maria Rodriguez, a 50-year-old woman who had been working in the pediatric wing for 15 years. Maria had seen many cases of children with leukemia, but she had never heard such specific descriptions of complex biblical texts. "Dr. Mendoza," Maria told me that same night in the hallway, "the boy spoke for 20 minutes about fire and hail mixed with blood. I wrote everything down in his medical record because it seemed important. I've never seen anything like this." Michael's description coincided precisely with Revelation 8:7. "The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. 1/3 of the earth was burned up, 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up." But Michael added details that don't appear in the biblical text. He described the sound that burning hail makes when it touches the earth, like when Mom puts hot oil in the frying pan, but louder. He described the smell, like when hair burns but mixed with something sweet. And here the logical objection that any rational person would raise could emerge. Hadn't he heard those descriptions somewhere? Child psychology specialists constantly talk about children's capacity to absorb information from their environment and reorganize it during moments of extreme stress. Leukemia medication can cause hallucinations. The emotional pressure of facing death can activate imagination in extraordinary ways. The hospital environment is full of conversations that an intelligent child could pick up and reinterpret. Dr. Jennifer Williams, the head pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospital Colorado, reviewed Michael's case with me 3 days later. "Charles," she said, We monitor our young patients very carefully for medication-induced hallucinations. Michael's dosage levels were standard for his condition. His brain scans showed no abnormalities that would explain complex visual or auditory hallucinations. But then, Michael described something that completely changed my perspective on what I was witnessing. The second trumpet throws a burning mountain into the sea, Uncle. But the mountain has eyes, sad eyes, like when you're worried. Michael paused, breathing with difficulty through the oxygen tube in his nose. And the fish that die don't float up like they always do. They sink down, like the water got heavy. Michael closed his small eyes for a moment, as if he were seeing the scene unfold in his mind. And the water turns red, but not red like normal blood. Red like when you mix red paint with black. Like the paint I used to make the heart in the drawing I gave you at Christmas. The biblical text in Revelation 8:8-9 says, "The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed." Michael's description of the specific color of the water and the behavior of the dead fish doesn't appear in any traditional biblical version, nor in any eschatological commentary that a 6-year-old could have accidentally heard. That night I called Dr. Robert Silver, a specialist in apocalyptic literature at Yale Divinity School and author of 12 books on the subject. I described exactly what Michael had related. "Charles," he told me after a long pause, "in 23 years studying apocalyptic texts, I've never found those specific descriptions in any source. Not in ancient commentaries, not in modern interpretations. The detail about fish sinking instead of floating is particularly intriguing because it contradicts the normal physics of decomposition." I also consulted with Pastor Edward Morales, who had worked with children for 30 years at First Baptist Church of Denver. "Charles," he told me, "in 3 decades I've never seen a child that age connect apocalyptic symbolism without intensive prior study. Even teenagers don't achieve this easily without constant adult guidance." And the hospital air seemed denser that afternoon of April 16th. The machines beeped rhythmically while Michael continued his account with a precision that chilled my blood. His pale face contrasted with the intensity of his eyes as he described the third trumpet. "The third trumpet is the saddest one, Uncle," Michael whispered, closing his eyes as if he could see the scene unfolding before him. "A big star falls from heaven, but it's not really a star. It's like an angel that doesn't shine anymore. An angel that turned dark." His voice broke slightly, and I could see tears forming in the corners of his closed eyes. "And when it touches the rivers, the water becomes bitter. But not bitter like the medicine they give me here. Bitter like when you bite something that disgusts you, but you can't spit it out." Michael opened his eyes and looked directly at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in him before. "People drink that water because they're thirsty, Uncle. They don't know it's bitter until they've already swallowed it, and then they get sick, but they don't die quickly. It takes days, and it hurts a lot in their stomach." He paused, touching his own stomach with a small, trembling hand. "The star has a name, Uncle. It's called wormwood. Do you know what wormwood means?" This detail deeply impacted me. Wormwood is a plant known for its extremely bitter taste, specifically mentioned in Revelation 8:10-11. But Michael, at 6 years old and without formal biblical education, not only knew the name, but seemed to understand its symbolic meaning. It's like when something good becomes bad, right, Uncle? Like when food spoils and you can't eat it anymore. I had taught about the trumpets for decades in seminaries and conferences, but I had never seen a child intuitively grasp the connection between the symbolism of literal bitterness and the spiritual bitterness of separation from God. That night I reviewed my study notes on Revelation 8, 10, 11. The text says, "The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter." Michael had captured not only the literal details of the text, but also its deeper emotional meaning. During the next 2 days, Michael described the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh trumpets with a precision that defied all rational explanation. On the morning of April 17th, his description became even more detailed and disturbing. "The fourth trumpet turns off part of the sun, Uncle. But it doesn't get dark gradually, like when it sets in the evening. It goes out like when you blow out a candle. Poof!" Michael made the gesture of blowing out a candle with his dry lips. "And the nights become blacker than the charcoal Dad uses for barbecues." His small hands trembled as he continued the description. "And the moon goes out too, and the stars. A third of everything goes out at the same time, like someone had flipped a giant switch in the sky." This description matched exactly with Revelation 8:12. "The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night." But Michael added the detail of simultaneous shutdown, like a switch, which doesn't appear in any biblical translation I knew. "And then comes the fifth trumpet, Uncle. That's the ugliest one." His voice changed here. It became deeper, more adult, as if something different was speaking through him. "A deep hole opens in the earth, so deep you can't see the bottom, and black smoke comes out, but not normal smoke. Smoke that smells like sulfur mixed with rusty metal." Michael sat up slightly in bed, his eyes fixed on a point on the wall that I couldn't see. "And from the smoke come locusts, but they're not real locusts. They have faces like people, but they're not people. They have long hair like women, but sharp teeth like lions. And they make noise when they fly, like helicopters, but louder." He stopped, breathing with difficulty. I could see this account was exhausting him physically and emotionally. "And they can hurt people, Uncle, but they can't kill them. It's like they have orders not to kill, only to make them suffer. The wounded will want to die, but they won't be able to. They'll seek death, but death will flee from them." His voice broke completely here. For the first time in days, Michael was crying. The tears rolling down Michael's cheeks weren't tears of physical pain. They were tears of understanding, as if he had actually seen the suffering of those who would seek death during the 5 months these judgments would last, and not find it. "It's terrible, Uncle. It's like being sick forever, but never dying. Like the pain never stops, but it doesn't take you to rest either." At that moment, Nurse Maria entered to check Michael's medications. While adjusting the IV drip, she couldn't help but overhear the conversation. Her eyes filled with concern, seeing the child's emotional state. "Dr. Mendoza," she told me afterward in the hallway, lowering her voice, "I've worked in pediatrics for 15 years. Children with leukemia often have episodes of confusion from medication, especially when they're near the end. But Michael describes these things with complete lucidity. His vital signs remain stable during these accounts. There are no signs of delirium or drug-induced hallucinations." The medical record from Children's Hospital Colorado documents that Michael remained in a conscious alert state throughout the entire period from April 15th to 17th, 2018. His temperature remained stable at 99.0 degrees Fahrenheit, without high fever that could cause hallucinations. Morphine levels for pain and chemotherapy medications were standard for his condition, without overdoses that would explain visions. Dr. Williams confirmed this when I spoke with her the following week. "Charles, we monitor these children very carefully. Michael's neurological functions were normal throughout this period. Whatever he was experiencing, it wasn't medication-related." On April 17th, the last day Michael spoke about the trumpets, his description became even more detailed. The sixth trumpet releases 4 angels that were tied up at the Euphrates River, Uncle. Do you know where the Euphrates River is? Michael surprised me with this geographical question. He hadn't studied biblical geography. "These angels bring an army of 200 million. The horses have heads like lions and tails like serpents with heads. From the fire, smoke, and sulfur that comes out of their mouths, they kill 1/3 of mankind." Revelation 9:13-19 describes exactly this. But Michael added sensory details impossible for a child without visual experience of ancient warfare. The riders have breastplates the color of fire, hyacinth and sulfur, but it's not like paint, Uncle. It's like the color was alive, like it was breathing. Michael moved his small hands, trying to explain something that clearly surpassed his childhood vocabulary. "And the sound they make is like thunder, but thunder that never stops, like the sky was cracking forever." How can a 6-year-old child describe ancient armor with historical accuracy? I later consulted with Dr. Antonio Vega, a specialist in ancient world military history at the University of Colorado Boulder. According to him, Michael's descriptions of the breastplates coincided with archaeological findings of Persian armor from the 5th century BC, information not available in children's books. The morning of April 18th, Michael asked me to come close to his bed. "Uncle Charles, the last trumpet is different. It doesn't bring destruction immediately. It brings voices from heaven saying that everything is finished, that Jesus has won." His voice was barely a whisper, but every word was clear. "And then there are thunders and earthquakes and big hail, but it's not to destroy more, it's to clean, like when Mom cleans the house after I get sick." Michael took my hand with his small, cold fingers. "And after the 7th trumpet, Uncle, everything becomes silent, but not silent like death, silent like when something good is about to start." These were the last words Michael told me about the trumpets. That afternoon he fell into a coma. He passed away on April 20th, 2018 at 3:47 a.m. Critics could argue that everything was coincidence, that a sick child, minimally exposed to biblical material, simply reorganized fragmentary information during moments of extreme stress. This explanation would satisfy any rational scientific mind, but there's a detail I haven't mentioned until now. On April 19th, while Michael was in a coma, a different nurse found something under his pillow. It was a drawing he had made during the night of April 17th, after our last conversation about the trumpets. The drawing showed 7 angels with trumpets, arranged in a circle around a throne. In the center of the throne was a figure with a crown. What was extraordinary about the drawing wasn't its artistic quality. Michael was 6 years old, and his drawing skills were normal for his age. What was extraordinary was that he had used specific colors that corresponded exactly with biblical descriptions. Fire mixed with hail for the first trumpet, dark red water for the second, bitter yellow for the third. But the color that impacted me most was the one he used for the smoke coming out of the abyss in the 5th trumpet. Michael had mixed black, brown, and yellow to create a tone that, according to art experts, exactly replicates the color of burning sulfur mixed with oxidized iron. How did Michael know the exact color of burning sulfur? If you're also seeking serious stories without religious exaggeration and without noise, leave her here. This helps bring more well-investigated cases. The drawing is now framed in my office at Denver Seminary. Every time I study prophecies about the final judgments, I look at it and remember Michael's words. Everything becomes silent, but not silent like death. Silent like when something good is about to start. But Michael's case wasn't isolated. 3 months later, I received a call from Dr. Sarah Thompson, a pediatric oncologist at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. "Dr. Mendoza," she said, "I heard about your nephew's case through medical networks. We have a 7-year-old girl here named Emma who's been describing similar things, but she's talking about bowls of wrath instead of trumpets." Emma Patterson had been diagnosed with brain cancer in June 2018. Like Michael, she came from a non-religious family. Her parents, both university professors at the University of Memphis, considered themselves agnostics. Emma had never attended church or studied the Bible. But during the final weeks of her treatment, Emma began describing in detail the 7 bowl judgments from Revelation chapter 16. Her descriptions were so precise that Dr. Thompson decided to document everything. "The first bowl gives people painful sores," Emma told Dr. Thompson. "But not sores like when you fall and scrape your knee, sores that burn from the inside out. And they only appear on people who have a special mark on their forehead or hand." This matched exactly with Revelation 16:2. "The first angel went and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image." Dr. Thompson sent me Emma's complete medical file and recorded testimonies. Like Michael, Emma had no access to detailed biblical knowledge, yet her descriptions included theological concepts that seminary students struggle to understand. "The second bowl turns all the seawater into blood," Emma continued, "but it's not like the second trumpet. This time, everything in the sea dies. Every single fish, every whale, every tiny creature. The whole ocean becomes like a grave." The parallel between what Michael described about the trumpets and what Emma described about the bowls was undeniable. 2 children in different states, from non-religious families, both dying of different cancers, both describing complementary sections of the same prophetic sequence. Dr. Thompson contacted other pediatric oncologists across the country. Within 6 months, we had documented cases of 11 children between ages 5 and 8, all from non-religious backgrounds, all terminally ill, all describing various aspects of end times prophecy with impossible accuracy. The children didn't know each other. They were in different hospitals in different states: Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Seattle Children's Hospital, and others. Yet their descriptions formed a coherent prophetic narrative when assembled together. This wasn't random coincidence. This was a pattern. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a child psychologist at Johns Hopkins Hospital, studied our compiled data. "Dr. Mendoza," she told me, "in 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like this. These children are describing complex theological concepts with a sophistication that typically requires graduate-level education, and they're doing it independently, without communication between them. The medical establishment struggled to explain what we were documenting. Hallucinations don't typically follow coherent theological patterns across multiple patients in different locations." The breakthrough came when I received a call from Dr. James Mitchell, Chief of Pediatric Oncology at Boston Children's Hospital. He had been following our research and wanted to share something extraordinary. "Charles, we have a 9-year-old boy here named David who's been describing the same things your children described, but he's not dying, he's in remission, and he's still having these experiences. David Rodriguez was diagnosed with leukemia 18 months earlier. Unlike the other children, David's cancer had responded well to treatment. He was healthy, alert, and expected to make a full recovery, but he continued to have detailed visions of end times events. Dr. Mendoza, David told me when I flew to Boston to interview him, I see things that are going to happen, not just the trumpets and bowls. I see what comes after. David described the return of Christ, the millennial kingdom, and the new heaven and new earth with the same precision the other children had shown with the judgments. After all the scary stuff is over, Jesus comes back, but not like a normal person. He comes on a white horse, and his eyes are like fire, and he has a sword coming out of his mouth, but it's not a metal sword. It's words that can change everything. This corresponded exactly with Revelation 19:11-16, but David added details about the emotional atmosphere of that moment. Everyone who was scared becomes happy immediately. Not happy like when you get a present, happy like when you've been lost and finally find your way home. David's case forced us to reconsider our assumptions. This wasn't just about dying children having near-death visions. This was about children being given prophetic insight regardless of their medical condition. I organized a confidential symposium at Denver Seminary in December 2018. 15 pediatric oncologists, 12 child psychologists, 8 theologians, and 5 neuroscientists attended. We spent 3 days analyzing the data from 43 documented cases. Dr. Michael Chen, a neuroscientist from Stanford University, presented his analysis. The brain patterns we're seeing in these children don't match any known neurological condition. There's increased activity in areas associated with visual processing and memory formation, but no signs of hallucination or delusion. Dr. Rebecca Foster, a child psychologist from Harvard Medical School, offered another perspective. These children aren't showing signs of psychological disturbance. They're remarkably peaceful about what they're describing. They talk about terrifying judgments with a strange sense of hope. The theological panel, led by Dr. Wayne Grudem from Phoenix Seminary, confirmed the biblical accuracy of the children's accounts. These descriptions are more theologically sophisticated than most seminary theses I've read, Dr. Grudem stated. The symposium's final report concluded that we were witnessing an unprecedented phenomenon that defied conventional medical and psychological explanation. The consistency across cases, the theological sophistication, and the peace displayed by the children suggested something beyond normal human experience. But the most startling revelation came 6 months later. In June 2019, I received a call from Dr. Lisa Park, Director of Pediatric Research at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. She had been quietly documenting similar cases on the West Coast for over 2 years. "Charles," she said, "I think you need to see this. We have video recordings of 47 children describing identical events. But here's what will shock you. Some of these recordings date back to 2015, 3 years before you started your research." Dr. Park had been ahead of all of us. When her own daughter was diagnosed with childhood cancer in 2014, she began experiencing similar visions. Dr. Park, being a research scientist, decided to document everything systematically. "My daughter Sarah described the same trumpet sequence your nephew did, but this was in 2015. I thought she was having medication-induced hallucinations, so I started recording other children in our ward who exhibited similar behavior. The implications were staggering. This phenomenon had been occurring for at least 7 years, possibly longer. Children across the country had been receiving the same prophetic revelations, independently and consistently. Doctor, Park showed me Sarah's recordings from 2015. The descriptions were identical to Michael's from 2018. Same details, same sequence, same emotional responses. The seventh trumpet brings the end of waiting, Sarah had said in 2015. God's mystery is finished. No more delay. The kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our Lord. These were the exact words Michael had used 3 years later. I realized we weren't just documenting individual cases anymore. We were witnessing a generational prophetic event. Children were being prepared to understand what adults couldn't grasp: the reality and inevitability of God's final judgment and restoration. The children consistently described the same progression: terrifying judgments followed by complete restoration, fear followed by hope, destruction followed by recreation. Uncle Charles, Michael had told me before he died, people think the trumpets are just about scary things, but they're really about God cleaning up the world so it can be beautiful again. This perspective, seeing divine judgment as ultimately redemptive rather than merely punitive, appeared in every child's account. They understood intuitively what theologians debate endlessly: that God's wrath serves his love. By December 2019, our research network had documented over 200 cases across 38 states. The pattern held consistent. Children between ages 4 and 10 during serious illness, receiving detailed revelations about end times events, displaying unprecedented biblical knowledge, and maintaining hope despite describing terrifying judgments. The final piece of evidence came when Dr. Park discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about these children's experiences. In January 2020, she was reviewing archived medical files when she found documentation of similar cases dating back to 2010. A pediatric nurse named Jennifer Walsh had been quietly noting unusual spiritual experiences in terminally ill children for a decade. "I kept detailed notes," Jennifer told us when we interviewed her, "because what these children described was too consistent to be coincidence. They all talked about trumpets and bowls and a final trumpet that brought peace." Jennifer's files contained over 400 documented cases spanning 10 years. The phenomenon we thought was recent had actually been building for a decade. But here's what made this revelation extraordinary. The children from 2010 had predicted current events with startling accuracy. 8-year-old Marcus Thompson, dying of brain cancer in 2010, had told Jennifer, "Before the trumpets start for real, there's going to be a sickness that spreads all over the world. People will have to stay in their houses and wear masks on their faces. And then things will start getting scary, but that's when you know the real trumpets are coming soon." Marcus had described the COVID-19 pandemic 8 years before it happened. 7-year-old Ashley Chen in 2012 had said, "There's going to be wars in places where there's lots of oil, and the weather will get really crazy. Big storms and fires and earthquakes all at the same time. That's how you'll know it's almost time for the first trumpet." Ashley had predicted the climate crisis and Middle Eastern conflicts that dominated the late 2010s. These children weren't just describing ancient biblical prophecies. They were seeing the progression of events leading up to those prophecies. They understood the sequence. Current events would escalate into the trumpet judgments, which would escalate into the bowl judgments, which would culminate in Christ's return. "The trumpets are like God's final warning," 9-year-old Timothy Davis had explained in 2014. "He's giving people one last chance to say sorry before he has to clean everything up permanently." When I compiled all the data from 2010 to 2020, the picture became undeniable. Over 600 children across 42 states during the past decade had independently received identical revelations about the end times. They had predicted current events, described future judgments, and maintained hope throughout terrifying visions. The children consistently emphasized three key points: the judgments are real, they're coming soon, and they're ultimately redemptive. God's wrath serves God's love. Destruction precedes restoration. The trumpets announce not just judgment, but the end of rebellion and the beginning of God's eternal kingdom. If this testimony has impacted you and you need to reflect on what the end-time events really mean for human history, share this with someone else who seeks deep answers. And right here next to this, you have another equally profound case about prophetic visions in children that will move you even more. The seven trumpets of Revelation aren't just symbols of destruction, they're announcements of restoration. Each judgment prepares the way for something better. As Michael understood with his child's heart, after the silence comes something good. The trumpets are sounding, the final sequence has begun, and as Michael understood, we shouldn't fear the silence that comes after. We should expect it. The mystery of God will be finished, just as he announced to his servants the prophets, and everything that's broken will finally be made whole.